There we go. Looks like we're live. Hello, Internet. I'm here with Matt. We're going to wait till some people come in to start seeing it. We'll wait till some comments come in. But Matt and I were just talking about lunchboxes a second ago. I was showing him this.
Sounds like a euphemism, but it's not.
It's not. We were actually talking about. I didn't show you this one. This one comes with a thermos as well. I actually had to buy the thermos separately. So if you look.
How can you be sure it's the correct thermos?
Because I remember it from second grade.
Oh. Excuse me.
Back off, man. I know my lunchbox. But no, it's got Spidey and Hulk and Cap on it. So
I did not have a Spider-Man lunchbox. I had a Masters of the Universe lunchbox.
He-Man,
and I want to say a Dukes of Hazzard lunchbox.
Okay, now we can talk. I had a Dukes of Hazzard lunchbox too. That was cool.
Yes.
Generally, I even had the watch where it every time you had an alarm, it did the Dixie sound. So I did that.
That'll be my next book, The History of Dukes of Hazzard.
Here, I'm going to share this link also. It's up on Facebook. Man, we've got 10 people in here already. Look at them come in. Look at that. So let me hit share. On a page I manage, no. There we go. Are you more of a Twitter guy than a Facebook?
I mean, I have both, but yeah, I tend to use Twitter more.
Yeah. Did they eliminate the X amount of characters?
They doubled it.
Oh, they did.
Yeah.
So I forget what the original number was.
I think it was 140 originally, and now it's like 280, something like that.
Cool. Okay, 8 people. Another thing, Matt, I can do is I can put comments up on the screen like that. Like Harry Lime says, this looks like a pretty friendly neighborhood. Spectacular Spider Guy says, I'm here.
Mm-hmm.
Austin says, hey, BD and guest. And SoFlo says, hello, everyone. So, and then I can put the banner back up of you. There you go. Okay, I'm ready if you are.
Let's do this.
Go. Coming down in 3, 2. Hey, Crawl Spacers, welcome to the special episode. We're interviewing Matt Singer. He's the author of Spider-Man, From Amazing to Spectacular, 2 of my favorite Spider titles. So, Matt, thanks for being on the Crawl Space. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So tell me about this. This is a huge book that you've written. This is the cover of it.
But when you hold it up without the actual book, it looks like I just made a cover.
It does.
There is actually a book. There it is.
The book is as big as it blocks my whole shot. Look at this. This book is absolutely. It's a huge coffee table book.
It's a gigantic book.
And I love the back cover. That looks really cool. Talk about the art. Who did the art of this cover?
The cover is by Andrew Robinson, the cover artist on Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. And he made it specifically for the book. It's like an original piece. And I'm pretty sure inside the book, there's a little print of the cover.
It's in the back, yes.
Yep, and you can hang that up if you want. I have one hanging in my house, not surprisingly.
I've actually got the, let me hit refresh. I've got the cover over here. Well, is it not going to let me share it? Maybe not. I will try. Let me remove that from stream. We'll try it later. But let's get a little history of your Spider fandom. Talk about when you became a Spider fan.
When I became a Spider-Man fan. Well, when did that Halloween Spider-Man head come out?
The thing over on my shelf. Yeah, that was mid-70s, like when the Ben Cooper
that's
costumes
a little older
came
than
out.
Me. I was born in 1980, but I guess they were still making those because we were talking before we started that that's like calling to me, like
you're going to eBay after this interview, right?
I can almost hear it like beckoning me, like, I mean, you must possess me again, because I had one of those as a kid. So, that era, we're talking that era, early 80s. the thing that really hooked me first was Spider-Man on the Electric Company.
Oh, love that. Yeah.
He was a frequent guest on the Electric Company, which was a show. Doesn't exist anymore. Ironically, I was just actually I guess there was they brought it back a few years ago.
Yeah, they did.
And Spider-Man, so really, who cares? But I was watching it with my kids this weekend, trying to sample it to see what it was like. But in the original Electric Company, Spider-Man had his own segment where he would this guy in a decent, I would say for the time, decent costume.
Dude, for 1980, that looked good.
I mean, it honestly, it kind of looks better than the one in the TV series that was around
Nicholas
that time.
Hammond. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly comparable. I mean, at worst.
Yeah.
And the idea was Spider-Man never spoke aloud. His voice was provided by word balloons. Exactly. So it was encouraging you as a little kid to read. So that was where I first discovered him, and I absolutely fell in love with him there. And and then I would occasionally read here and there, but what really hooked me as a reader of the comics was the 30th anniversary issues, which was around I think 1992.
The hologram covers, huh?
Yes, you have to say it like the hologram covers. They had holograms on the covers. They were so cool.
Nice comic book guy there.
Yeah. So those came out. I would think I was 12 years. If it was 92, I was 11 years old probably when they came out. And my dad was a big comic book fan when he was a kid. He had a lot of the really early Amazing Spider-Man issues as a kid, and sort of, I forget how he found out about it. Maybe there was an article in the Times or something, and he was like, "Let's go get the 30th anniversary issue of Spider-Man." And I was like, "You're going to buy me comic books. I'm not going to say no." And
let's go.
And that was it. That was the ones that really hooked me. I had all 4 of them, and Amazing Spider-Man was the one that really grabbed me at that time, and that was it. I was a reader ever since.
Awesome. So you came in right when the robot parents were coming in, and
yes, that was
92, I think. Yeah,
that's right. The first issue, that was the cliffhanger at the end of the issue, was his parents showed up. We didn't know they were robots. Thanks for spoiling it. But
30 plus year later spoiler. I apologize. Yeah.
Yeah. The parents showed up, and only having read a couple of comics at that point, I didn't quite understand the gravity of it. But as you read the storyline, you came to understand it. And then, of course, when they were revealed to be robots, I think the Chameleon was behind it all. Yeah. That was a huge, oh my God, they were robots all along.
Oh, no.
I mean, it was devastating.
Spider-Man's the most relatable hero, but how often do we have a parent plot of robots? That doesn't come up in the average Joe's life, It's
a very relatable story to find out your parents who were spies for the U.S. government who died decades earlier, who left you in the care of your kindly old aunt. They showed up alive, but turned out to be robot duplicates. I mean, it's a classic. It's almost cliche. I'm kind of sick of seeing it, honestly. When are these writers going to come up with some new ideas?
Michelinie, after he wrote that, he got done. He left the book after the robot parents. He was done.
Kind of his swan song.
So 92, you started. Did you stick throughout, or was there periods of Spider comics that you dropped off, or have you been a reader since 92?
There have been some periods where I would say I've slowed down. Certainly I wasn't, reading every single thing, maybe not reading all the books, but I read Amazing Spider-Man pretty much from that point on, all through high school, through college. I worked in a comic book store for a few years.
Oh, you did? That's awesome.
Yes. So that made it easier. I have kids now. Like I said, I have 2 kids, so I don't really get to go to the store that much. So I'm behind, but I read everything on the Marvel Unlimited app.
Oh, isn't that great? I have that too. I love that thing.
It's so great. So that's not a paid plug. They don't pay me to say that. So so I'm 6 months behind everything, but I still read pretty much everything.
No doubt. Before we move on, I want to hit the point up. You worked in a comic book store. Any funny stories from that? That sounds like you never know who's coming in the door.
We did have a couple of famous people used to come in occasionally. This was in central New Jersey.
Okay.
I think, is Sebastian Bach the lead singer of a famous hair band?
You're asking a bald guy if he knows hair bands. It's all good.
And you're asking somebody who doesn't never listen to, let's see.
So between us, we don't have we have a Google, maybe.
Skid Row. Yeah, that's him. I think it's him. So Sebastian Bach, I guess used to live, I don't know where he lives now, but he used to live in near the store where I worked.
Right.
Zap Comics in Central New Jersey.
Nice.
And he used to come in all the time. He was very nice. I'm trying to think of anyone else. Brian O'Halloran, who played Dante in
Clerks.
Movies, right? Because Kevin Smith is from the same area, so he lived around there. He came in a couple of times.
That's cool.
Yeah. Dan DiDio came in a few times.
He's DC guy, yeah.
He knew the manager somehow. I'm trying to think if I had any funny stories, but I mean,
were you always telling people not to read them on the shelves? You got to buy them first. Don't get the fingerprints.
No, that didn't happen that often. But there was one customer, who would come in
with Cheeto fingers. No,
no, he didn't. No, his hygiene was fine, but he would come in, and we recognized him at a certain point. He would come in, and he would try to look like he was browsing. He would look at the wall, right, and he would like open a book, and he would leave it on the wall. And he would look at it on the wall and maybe turn a couple of pages and then close it and then take another one. And he almost never bought anything. But, I mean, he was harmless. He didn't really bother anybody. So I don't think we ever really, at least I didn't ever have to talk to him. But there's definitely one that came to mind that was a reader who didn't buy anything.
I love that. So I'm going to share the cover. I think I've got it working now. So
excellent.
Let me pull it up, and you can see this beautiful cover of the book. There it is, and you even have the Spider-Verse, aka Frank Miller, Kingpin in the back.
Yes, he. I was very pleased when I saw that. So Andrew Robinson did the cover.
Beautiful cover.
They had him make it specifically for the book, and before when the editor first sent me. She told me that, we've got Andrew working on the cover. I was like, great, because I love his covers. And, he's a guy who does covers. So not only is he a great artist, like you thinking, oh, it's going to be great. And then I saw the sketch. She sent me the sketch, like the approved design sketch. And as soon as I thought, I was like, oh, my God.
That's going to pop. Yeah,
that's going to look so great. And, he killed it. Did a great job.
So talk about how the project came about. We're showing some of the preview images that are up on Amazon right now. That are inside the book. Tell me how this project came about for you.
So it's the publisher is a company called Inside Editions, and they have done a bunch of these sorts of books. They all have different titles. They're not really titled as if they are a series, but they're sort of an informal series of books where they're, history books, but also with a ton of artwork from the history of different characters. They've done a Black Widow one, they've done a Black Panther one, they've done a Guardians of the Galaxy one, and so this is the Spider-Man one. And I had done a couple of projects for the publisher, smaller things, essays in other books, and emailed an editor I knew there just at the right time, basically saying, I have some ideas, but I'm open to, if you have something that needs writing. And the editor was like, well, I don't have anything at the moment, but by any chance, do you like Spider-Man?
Do I?
So I, immediately like, don't So and that was basically the beginning, and had to, basically audition, I guess, so to speak, for the actual editor of the book, and took a little while, had to get approved, all that stuff. And then
how do you audition to write one of these books? How do you audition for something?
Well, there was a singing component for some reason. The swimsuit competition was surprisingly competitive.
Wow.
No, there was a phone interview. There was, I sent along some clips, some things I had written. I had done that other stuff for the company, which helped. Had a long interview, kind of laying out what I would want to do, talking about my sort of, thoughts and opinions about Spider-Man. And that was about it. I had to get approved. It's a licensed book by Marvel, so they had to approve me as well. But that was it.
Awesome. So when did you get started on it? How long did this book take to make?
It not enough time is the answer. All that stuff I was describing was, I guess, it's about a year and a half ago. It was like the fall of 2018, and then the book itself, the first draft, was due like January, February of 2019. And then there was
September to February to work
yeah,
on it. Yeah,
so it's not a lot of time. And then there was some there was revisions and stuff like that, and also selecting the artwork, captioning the artwork, all that stuff. But it was much less than a full year, maybe 6 months total from start to finish.
Yeah. Talk about the research. What did you do? I know you've been researching since 1992 when you picked up those hologram
That's
covers.
right. Yes, you stole my cutesy answer that I always give when you ask me that question.
You can say it again.
No, that's all right. No, it's true. Yeah, I did have quite a few years of research under my belt already, but I already mentioned that Marvel Unlimited app. That was extremely useful. Doing some reading. It was a combination of reading things I had never read, reading things that I had read but were kind of needed to refresh my memory. I don't have quite the number of boxes you have behind you, but in my poor parents' basement there are quite a few, and so there was some digging through there to get some stuff that for example isn't on that Unlimited app. Doesn't have everything.
Like a lot. There's big chunks of Spectacular gone out of the Unlimited.
There's a lot
I wish we could read that all the way through.
Spectacular. They're missing some adjectiveless Spider-Man. In fact, that was a lot of what I needed. They have pretty much the whole Clone Saga on there, and I think since I actually wrote the book, they have updated it, which is somewhat frustrating because some of the things I needed are on there now. But like the end of the Clone Saga, the stuff where Peter Parker comes back as Spider-Man, like the very, very end. I think it's called Revelations, maybe the 4-part storyline that really wrapped it up. Like that wasn't on there at the time, and I really needed to have that in the book, and so I had to dig out my old issues of that. So it was it was a lot. I mean, I didn't, I certainly didn't keep track, but if I had to guess, I would guess that I spent more hours reading and rereading than I did actually writing, even though I had to write an entire book.
Well, that must be nice. You said you're married, and you said if you ever, I'm doing research, honey. I'm reading Marvel Unlimited. That's a good excuse. I'm working.
It was the best excuse ever. Yeah, go deal with the. I can't deal with the kids right now. I'm reading Spider-Man.
He just cloned himself. I'm in the 70s. I'm almost there.
Yeah. So yeah. Oh, the book was definitely like the hardest. The hardest I've ever worked on anything, because I have a day job and I was doing my. I took a couple of days off here or there to work on the book, but basically I would put the kids to bed, my wife would go to sleep, and then I would work all night basically and work on the weekends on the book. But it's the most fun I've ever had working on anything, because you're reading Spider-Man, you're interviewing Spider-Man creators, you're writing about Spider-Man, you're picking Spider-Man art. Like, it was. It was absolutely a dream come true. It was the most fun I've ever had. Not sleeping and working my butt off. So, it was great.
So you put the kids to bed. How many issues are you reading a night? How many are you going through on that app?
It depended on the night, but probably if it would be more like I would look at, like I was trying to do like storylines, or getting through. I've got to get through everything that Roger Stern wrote this week, or I've got to get through the Clone Saga this week, or I have to reread some of Ultimate Spider-Man. I never really kept track of how many issues in a night, but I would guess, a typical night would be like 25, maybe.
Oof, man, that's a lot of reading.
Yeah.
Was there something in the research that you came across that you were surprised by?
Something in the research I came across and I was surprised by. I think the surprises for me were, wasn't anything like shocking in terms of, like, I can't believe this, or how. It was more like I would read things and it was a general sense of, even though I've loved Spider-Man, pretty much my whole life, and I've read so many comics, is like, you read things as a kid, and it, you understand when you go back and look at it again, it might not be that good. You have, nostalgia for some things, and nostalgia can sort of taint your vision of them. And I was sort of impressed and surprised, like, just how many great Spider-Man comics there were. Like, I guess theoretically, if you didn't like Spider-Man, or if the comics weren't that good, all that research would be kind of a chore. Oh, I got to read more. There's certain comics we could probably name where if you had to read 25 issues a night for months, you would lose your mind. But with Spider-Man, it was like, obviously there are these times in Spider-Man that are very famous and justifiably so, but I was finding like, runs and stories that aren't necessarily like the most famous, and going, these are really good. Like this, why don't people talk about this? This is a fabulous run of issues.
Like what specifically were you thinking of that were underrated?
One that always jumps to mind that really, like, maybe because I hadn't read that much of it as a kid, because it was sort of right before I started reading monthly, and then it doesn't have a great reputation. At least no one ever told me to read it. But the issues that really I loved a lot, that I was really surprised by, were the ones by Tom DeFalco and Ron Frenz when they're writing Amazing Spider-Man, like the first issues with like the black costume, the Venom suit, when Peter first gets it right after Secret Wars. Like those issues are great. They're amazing. The stuff with the costume is really clever. I think Tom DeFalco was a really underrated writer of Peter Parker and of Spider-Man. Those
Mary
are the
Jane,
issues. What's that?
And Mary Jane also.
And those are the issues where they totally reinvented Mary Jane, like the character that we know now. Like they were the ones who kind of introduced that, and they have that great issue where she tells her basically her secret origin, and she reveals that she's always known he's Spider-Man. And you get that wonderful connection between them where they both have these secret lives. They both have almost secret identities. There's kind of all these lovely connections between the characters. What's that?
She wears a party girl mask. Yeah, he wears a red and blue mask. Yeah. Exactly.
And so you see why these characters, who maybe at certain times maybe you didn't understand what drew them together. It was one of those kind of retcons in comics that comes along every so often, where you suddenly go, this makes everything make more sense, And they were the guys who did that, and they have they weren't on the book for that long, but those were the ones that I had never read before, and I absolutely was blown away by how good they were. And I probably could have stopped reading at a certain point and said, okay, I got it. I don't need to read every single one for the book, but I did. I just kept going because they were just so entertaining.
Two of my favorites that DeFalco and Friends did is ASM 269 and 70, the fight of Firelord. I love that fight. I think he's the underdog, and he took down a Galactus Herald essentially, which some people debate if that's possible. I say yes, it is. It's Peter Parker. He can do anything he wants. One thing we were inside the book is, I'm going to add some more. You have some beautiful looking art inside this book. Talk about what it was like, because it really gets blown up in this coffee table size. Talk about what it was like to get the art for it. Did you pick out what images go in the book, or
So the art was all chosen by me and the editor together. We kind of, as I was doing all that research, I was constantly taking notes about, this would be good, this would be good. And she had her kind of wish list. I had my wish list. We put them together and kind of combined into one kind of joint list. And yeah, the book, you showed the actual book on screen earlier. It's gigantic. And so one of the cool things about the book is that the artwork in most cases is bigger than it even was, in a comic.
Here, I can.
So you really get to, and if you just
demonstrate, because you can compare it to my head, I guess.
Yes.
And I'll just pick a random page.
Right. If your head was comic book sized, you could say,
talking about this.
That was one of the issues I needed to find. Peter Parker, Spider-Man 75. Yes, that one was not. That was not on Marvel Unlimited. But yeah, so you get gigantic artwork. You get to kind of pour over it, really, really big, which is super cool. Yeah. And we sort of did it all together. There really wasn't, it was hard winnowing it down. I mean, that was really the one difficult thing, was because there's 50 odd years of amazing.
One subtle thing that I liked about the book, once you take the dust jacket off on the front,
yes, there's a little embossed. Oh yeah.
Well, you matched the front spider on his costume, and you matched the back symbol on the costume. So I thought that was
not too many people noticed that, and well done. Yes,
that was really well done, I thought.
Yes.
So let's see what else we have. I've been multitasking. I'm holding up books, and I get back to my question. getting art for the book, you go to Marvel and you say, I want this page, I want that page. Do they have like an archive of images and folders that they send over to you and you pop it into the book when you produce it?
That would probably be a question more for the editor, because she was the one who really dealt directly with Marvel. But I will say, like, we put together, what we wanted, and there wasn't anything that we, like, oh, we don't have that, we can't put that in. It was pretty much, wide open, whatever we wanted. I'm trying to think if there were any like, oh, you can't put this in, we can't use this, but there really wasn't. I mean, the only kind of notes we got at all really was just like, add more of this, we would love to see more of that, which fine by me. I was constantly begging to write more, to make it longer. Adding, there's sidebars in the book. That was my idea. That was me begging to
I love the sidebars. It gives you a little history of what the images are about.
Yeah, and the previews that you were showing on the screen earlier, like a bunch of those previews are actually the little sidebars.
I can go back to it. I'll pull them up.
There's not one in every chapter, but most chapters. Like, that one is
right over here. Yeah.
So that's the one. So basically, we haven't really talked about the interviews I did for the book, but I did a ton of interviews, and one of them was Alex Ross. And he designed this particular costume, like the redesign that they had a few years ago. And I asked him a bunch of questions, but I asked him a couple about this, like, about the design, not just of his redesign, but, the actual original, Ditko design as well. And he had so many great things to say that it was like, this is like, none of this is making it into the book because I'm having trouble finding a place for it. So, gave it a sidebar. This is actually just part of a chapter, but I know that there is, one of the ones you showed was for like Spider-Gwen. She has a sidebar.
I'll find it.
That was again, like, we need to get some more. It would be great to have. Yeah, there she is. So like that was
there's your sidebars right here.
Yeah. So cool. Almost every single chapter has one of those. And that was a case of there was just so much stuff to kind of shoehorn in that I was constantly trying to find ways to, anywhere I could, squeeze a little bit more. So there's a couple of sidebars as well. And that was the hard part. It wasn't so much like Marvel was honestly like very accommodating, very easy to work with, had very few notes or issues. And it was really just, because the book is big this way, but it's not that big this way. And so it was, squeezing as much as we possibly could in from 50 plus years of comics.
No doubt. You were talking about those interviews. You interviewed Alex Ross. Talk about some other ones. You've got one that I've never been able to get, is Straczynski. How did you get the interviews? Where there's email?
There's some. It's a mix. There are some email. There are some on the phone. It just depended on the person, and I pretty much, anyone who was willing to talk to me, if it was up to me, I would prefer phone. But if they're only willing to do email, then I would make that work as well. Straczynski, and there was a few people in there that I was fortunate that many lifetimes ago, I worked at a website that was edited by Chris Ryle, who is now the editor of IDW.
Okay.
And so when I was, I forget how I was talking to him about the project, but at some point I mentioned it to him, and he helped me connect to a few people that I probably would not have been able to get otherwise. And Straczynski was one of them. And we did that one over email, but he gave me some wonderful stuff that is in the book. And that was, yes, I was very lucky to get him. But yeah, there's something like, I think there's like somewhere between 15 and 20-ish interviews that I did in the book.
Falco, I remember Stearns in there, Roy Thomas.
Jerry Conway, Dan Slott, Brian Michael Bendis. We mentioned Alex Ross, James DeMatteis, who did the foreword for the book as well.
Talk about that. He's one of my favorites. He wrote Kraven's Last Hunt. What was it like to get him to do the foreword? Did you just say, "Hey, would you mind?"
That was sort of how I got to do the interview with him. And then the editor went back to him and said, "Would you mind doing the foreword?" And he said he would love to, and he did a great job with that as well. And he's someone, I mean, but really everyone I spoke to, like, the thing that comes across is like, we're sitting here, obviously we are very passionate about Spider-Man. Like you feel the same passion from everyone that you talk to about it. Like it's like, it's not just a gig for the writers and the artists. Like, they have their own favorite storylines. They have their own favorite interpretation of Spider-Man. They all have a story about the first issue they read and they fell in love with, and why the character resonated with them. Like, it's a character that means a lot to not just the fans of the character, but to the people that make the book. It seems I didn't come across anyone who's like, oh yeah, Marvel wanted me to write Spider-Man, so I wrote it for a while, and I hated it, but I guess people liked it. Like, that doesn't really exist. Like, obviously the earliest issues were Stan Lee and Steve Ditko and John Romita, but it was like pretty much everyone after that was like a Spider-Man fan. Like, they came to the book, even like Jerry Conway, who was 19 when he started writing the book. Like, it was like very, like, it was more than just a writing assignment or an art assignment. And that was kind of cool to see, because, for myself, like, obviously this wasn't just a typical writing assignment either, because I love the character so much as well. So that was sort of heartening to see that the people doing it felt the same way about him as I did.
You're talking about your first exposure to Spider-Man was Electric Company. It was mine also, and also Amazing Friends. That I can't look at Amazing Friends and not have just childish eyes on it. I can't pick that cartoon apart, because I thought that was the best we're ever going to get. So, I mean, you probably are the same way with the Electric Company, etc.
Yes.
So, yeah. Anybody in the book that you wanted to get that you couldn't, besides Steve Ditko and Stan Lee?
Well, yeah, those would have been the big ones.
You could print money.
Yeah, that would have really been something. Yeah, Stan Lee passed away like literally like 2 weeks or so before I first talked to the editor. Like, the timing just was, just unfortunately, couldn't possibly work out. Because they sent me, when I was starting to work on this one, they sent me Inside Editions. They sent me some of the other books that are very similar. So I had a sense of like the kind of thing they were going for. And, he's interviewed, and I think the Black Panther one has some interviews with him. So I was very jealous of the writer of the Black Panther book of this kind. Anybody else? I mean, there's a million. I never, the one that I kept chasing and I never figured out, I could never got in touch with him and couldn't make it work, was Sal Buscema. Is another amazing artist who I love and loved as a kid. And I email different email addresses. I had people trying. It never quite tracked him down. So that's one that comes to mind. I would have loved to have talked to him, because he drew so many issues. He spanned different eras of the character. It would have been great to talk to him, but that didn't work out.
10 years ago, because I started this podcast in 2006, probably about 2010 or 2009, I think we had him on the show. And it was his 50th anniversary working at Marvel.
Wow.
And through various things, I was able to get Stan Lee on the show and surprise Sal on this show. And it was, I don't think Stan knew he was live on the air. He cussed a little bit. So I'll email you the link to the show that you can listen to that. We had Ron Friends, Tom DeFalco, and Stan Lee surprising Sal for his 50th anniversary. That was my biggest show I've ever done.
That's a pretty good one.
No offense to you, but that was my favorite show that we ever did.
That is pretty awesome. Yeah, I did years ago when I worked at the Independent Film Channel. I interviewed Stan Lee at E3 of all places. Like, there was a Marvel video game there, and they brought him in to promote it. And you're saying he didn't know he was on the air. He was maybe a little salty with the language. And that was exactly how he was when I met him, like backstage. We were like sitting somewhere, like in a green room somewhere. And he's like, and he's like Stan, but he's also like cussing up a storm. And then I loved it. As soon as the camera went on, he was like, Excelsior,
exactly. Like he turned it on and off.
Turned it on and off. And yeah, it was like, that was pretty awesome to get to witness, for
Really
sure.
fun.
But when you say he was a little salty, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Fun. Now, talk a bit about the layout of the book. You kind of, in the beginning, kind of did it by decades. You did the 60s and the popularity growth of the 70s, and then the clones and the symbiotes, etc. Talk about how you wanted to lay this book out.
So the layout, the outline was really the first step, was just, you know, we have X number of pages, we have X number of words. How are we going to cover all of this in, you know, that amount of space? And to me, it was just knowing the character like I do. It was just kind of like, okay, well, trying to find the natural places that can be grouped together. So, you know, obviously like the creation and the Lee and Ditko period, Lee and Romita period. And then you kind of go, well, I only have X number of chapters and I have to, you know, so it's kind of like a jigsaw puzzle.
Yeah.
And just trying to figure out what eras are the most important and what things deserve their own chapter and what things can be part of a chapter. What things are you going to just have to kind of skim over, and what kind of things do you have to really dive into and give the full, you know, as much attention as you possibly can.
What were some things that you had to take out that you wanted to put in there that you didn't have enough space?
I mean, literally anything. I mean, I would have loved to like just publish like a book of the full interviews that I did, honestly. Like, cause I talked to like, you know, like I talked to Brian Bendis for like 3 hours. I talked to Dan Slott for like 3 hours. Like, so there's just a tiny, tiny fraction that's in the book. And you know, I tried to include as much as I could, but there's just so many fun little tidbits that, you know, didn't quite make the cut. In terms of like specific like storylines or characters or I'm trying to think. I mean, one that I would have liked to have put in there, and it wasn't a space issue, but you know, we mentioned that I loved as a kid the 30th anniversary issues with the hologram covers. Well, hologram covers don't really translate to a book like my book. You know, you can't really republish that. It would just look like a big gray blab. So as much as like that issue has a huge amount of personal meaning for me, and I would have liked to have included it purely selfishly for that reason, that was one that I couldn't sneak in there. There's a couple in there. There's a couple of covers that, one or two in particular that I really love that I kind of snuck in. Not snuck in because like, you know, it's all approved and they're great covers, but like that they have personal meaning to me, that they're in there as much for me as they are for, you know, historical purposes. But that was
what are they? What are some that you are personal?
Well, one, I always forget the actual issue, but there's one specific issue of Amazing Spider-Man. I'll see if I can find it in my copy. I have a PDF here. I'll go through and see if I can find it. There's one issue of Amazing Spider-Man from here it is. So it's issue number 68, Crisis on Campus. Which is a great cover. But the reason it's really in there, besides the fact that it's a beautiful cover, is I mentioned my dad was a comic book fan, and he had I don't even know how many, but a lot of the very early Spider-Man issues, a lot of the really early, you know, Silver Age Marvel stuff. And my late grandmother, bless her soul, threw away many, many, many of them.
She was that grandma, huh?
God bless grandmas. They are the best, but they do have a habit of throwing away comic books. At least they did in the 60s. I don't know what was going on.
There you go. There's what you're talking about right there.
Yes, there it is.
Campus, yeah.
That is in the book. It's got like its own page in the book. So most of my father's like collection was thrown away, but he managed to save somewhere like a stack like this. It's a bunch of different stuff. Justice League, a lot of Justice League because he loved the Justice League. The Atom, he was a big Atom fan, the DC character, the Atom. And there's a couple of Marvel ones in there, and there's 2 Spider-Man issues. There's Amazing Spider-Man number 5. With Dr. Doom, and this issue, which was actually in really good condition. And so like as a kid, I read it over and over, and it has a lot of, it's a great issue, but it also has a lot of sentimental value for me. So that was the reason that, you know, when you're looking for examples, you need great examples of John Romita covers and covers from that era. There's a lot you could pick.
There you go. There's
and there's a few different ones. Yes, that's the other one. Now, I don't even think my copy that my dad gave me even has the cover. If it has the cover at all, it's like half of that image, and it's not even attached. It's just it's a shredded piece of paper. But the rest of the issue is intact, and I definitely did very carefully read it, and I still have all of the ones he gave me. But yeah, so that's one that's in there, sort of. It's like a Matt Singer Easter egg, I guess, in the book.
The cover, I don't know if everybody else likes it, but it was like my very first one that I ever got was Marvel Team Up Annual 2, because Hulk is my second favorite hero. And he's holding Spider-Man's holding apart these two, I don't know what they are, and Hulk is pouncing behind him. And no one else loves that book, but I do. I understand quite well your fondness of certain thing that has more sentimental value than anything.
I'm looking up this annual. Oh yes, I see it here. Oh yes.
I should say and see. Let me do. I always equate this as my first comic, and I'll put it up on the screen.
I mean, how could you not like that?
And that's in the peak of the 70s, where Spider-Man's on television, the Hulk's Bill Bixby and Lou Ferrigno. Right. I mean, that sealed me for a Marvel fan forever. That cover.
Got to keep these globes from touching.
Yeah, exactly.
Or they destroy the Earth.
Dude, how can? And it's 75 cents. So it's a king size annual. So it's big.
I really hope he didn't let those globes touch. Nobody tell me. I'm gonna have to go in. I'm gonna go read that one on the Marvel Unlimited app tonight after we
it's
wrap
not
it up.
On there. I don't think it's on there. It needs to be.
Someday. I'm sure they'll add it someday.
No doubt. Favorite era of Spider-Man? What's your favorite era of Spider-Man? When do you think it was on all cylinders? When do you think it was really cooking?
Well, I mean, kind of like what I was saying earlier, like there's so many good eras. Like doing the research, you go, there was never a point where I was like, oh, I've got to read this or I've got to read that. Even the stuff that has a bad reputation, a lot of it, it's still Spider-Man. It's kind of like pizza. Even bad pizza is still pizza. It's like even a bad Spider-Man comic is still a Spider-Man comic. It can't really be that bad.
Since you grew up in the 90s, I would think your attachment would be in the 90s. I would imagine.
I do love. I mean, those issues that first grabbed me, the ones in like the 350 to 400 era, very very sentimental for me. I think a lot of those are really fun. I was Mark Bagley was the artist for a lot of that. He was the one that really caught my attention, and so I've always loved his art. He went on to do Ultimate Spider-Man with Bendis. And I always thought that was a great pairing. I was reading Bendis's really early Image comics, and so when he got that gig, that was I was on board from the very first issue, and I had every single one. So, I mean, I think and rereading those, I mean, some of the pop culture references in Ultimate Spider-Man are getting a little dated now because the goal was to make it very contemporary for the early 2000s.
Any that come to mind because I haven't read them since they came out in the 2000s.
I was rereading them now like over a year ago, and I'm lucky if I remember what I ate for lunch. But I feel like there's at least one or two Ja Rule references. Like, no disrespect to Ja Rule, but that really places it in like a. There's some very, very topical musical references. Peter will be mentioning what he's listening to, where you're like, in 2002 or whatever it was, like this made perfect sense. That's what was on the radio. But it is sort of funny to look back at it 15 or so years later.
That comes to mind. Peter and Mary Jane's favorite song was established in the 70s, and it was Kung Fu Fighting.
Oh, sure. A classic. Yeah.
Really well. I think they came up in the 90s or the 2000s. They reference, yep, that's still our favorite song. That's
not problematic at all either.
No, so I like Kung Fu Fighting. And the opposite end of that question, what's your least favorite era? Where was Spider-Man struggling?
I've like the one again. This is it's like.
Bad pizza. It's still
it's pizza. Bad pizza. It's still not that terrible, but like the ones that sort of lost me, I lost a little bit of interest was the very the very tail end of the original volume of Amazing Spider-Man, which then they relaunched. I think just 2 books, Amazing Spider-Man and Peter Parker Spider-Man with #1s, and John Byrne was involved in those. And you know, I think that's around the period of like they did the chapter 1 book as well. I've never been a huge fan of those, any of that stuff. I mean, I think the artwork, you know, John Byrne's artwork is wonderful. I always loved his Spider-Man. I mean, he's just an amazing artist in general. But that batch of stories, I've never really kind of, you know, those are, I can't say I probably would have reread those if not for the project, if not for the book. Right. So that's one that comes to mind as they're okay, but you know,
that is a consensus.
Top tier.
That's a popular opinion, and I agree with you very much so.
Okay.
Actually, my next question had chapter 1 in it. We when we entered the late '90s, we had chapter 1, and then we had Ultimate Spider-Man in 2000s. What are your thoughts about going back to the beginning and retelling that origin? What do you think it's for another generation, or do you think they shouldn't go back to the well again and keep retelling the origin again?
You know, I think to me, it's like any story. It's not what, you know, there's a famous Roger Ebert quote about movies. It's not what the movie is about. It's how it's about it. And I think it probably applies to all art. It certainly applies to comics. You could use it here. You know, I think the right slant on it, the right creators, I'm happy to read a new version of Spider-Man's origin. You know, like you take those two examples, like chapter 1, I always thought was, you know, again, like it looks great, but it's like to a certain extent, when you're simply just retelling the origin, basically you're trying to like update some of the technology, some of the references, some of the fashion so that it doesn't look quite as dated.
Yeah.
To me, it's like if you're just retelling something just for the sake of retelling it, especially something like that story that's so famous and now is so easily read everywhere. You don't need to have a copy of Amazing Fantasy 15 versus Ultimate Spider-Man, where it's the same essential idea, but instead of one issue for the origin, they take 7. And instead of Uncle Ben being on 3 pages, he's like a major character in that storyline. And you actually get to learn a little bit about him. And he's a little bit different of a guy than the doddering old man. You know, and Aunt May is a younger Aunt May. So to me, it's like I'm always up for any Spider-Man story with the right creators, with the right kind of take on it. It's not like, oh, I refuse to read this. I never want to see this again. I'm not so militant about it. I love Spider-Man. It's Spider-Man,
exactly. No doubt.
So yeah, it's all in the how it's told, really.
In the book, you talk about how John Byrne and Howard Mackie took over the book, and then they left, and Straczynski came in. And his in the book, you talk about he had one mission, and that was to do something different. He made Peter a teacher. The spider that bit him now had a motive, and there were spider totems. Talk about that change. It was kind of Spider-Man was kind of going downhill a little bit until Straczynski took him back up.
Yeah, you know, that was another run that I had read all those issues when they were coming out, and then rereading them, I really loved rereading those. And you know, like you were saying, he wanted to do something different. I feel like even now they really stand out as very different because right after he left, they sort of de-aged the character a little bit. They made him, you know, they kind of brought him back to the, you know, the sort of the bachelor Peter Parker, you know, I don't know if he's technically a student, but he's sort of, you know, like the perpetually underemployed, you know, living with roommates, struggling, you know, having all these sorts of, you know,
they go back to the default version.
Sort of iconic representation of the character. And Straczynski does all these different things with him. Yeah, he makes him a teacher, which I always thought was a really, you know, apart from the logistics of a guy who's constantly like running away to go fight a monster man, probably would have a hard time having a 9-to-5 job like a teacher.
You can do it on the plan period, you know?
yeah, right. He's using his he's taking a lot of time off, and he's his PD and stuff. But other than that, I always thought it was a very appropriate role for Peter Parker. Like Peter Parker is such an inspirational figure, like on a meta level, you know, like people really like look to that character as this inspirational figure. And like, so of course he would be an inspirational figure in the lives of these kids. Like he would want to do that. That makes perfect sense to me. Right. So I love that. And you know, people I don't think really remember like that period. Like he actually like breaks Peter and Mary Jane up. They're like separated for a long time. And I didn't really talk to him about this, but like I know his own marriage broke up not long before that, and you feel maybe that he's drawing some, there's like a personal element
you
that I
write
think
what you know.
exactly. And I think you do, and I think that that's part of maybe what made those issues really pop and have a really adult feel. Like it's an adult Spider-Man that you don't really get to see very often. And yeah, I know later in the run he went down some weird.
Norman sleeping with Gwen and having twins.
That was a little weird, but
he originally wanted it to be Peter's kids, is what I understand too.
I believe you're correct. Yeah, so that probably would have been again. I
think his editor rejected that idea, so he went with Norman.
Yeah, but I think a lot of that run really holds up really well. John Romita Jr. doing the art for most of those is amazing, and I think that they because they did sort of shift the character back before, right after that, and ended the marriage and all that stuff. Like they really do kind of hold up as this unique period in the character, because they haven't really done there's some exceptions now with like Renew Your Vows and even that recent Life Story book, which is really, really good.
Oh yeah.
They haven't really done that sort of like adult take on the character very much. And so it does stand out for that reason.
As a longtime reader, the adult Peter Parker is the one I want. I've seen high school so much, but I guess I'm not the demographic that they want, but I am the demographic that buys the $4 books.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's true. It absolutely is.
You talk a little bit about One More Day in the book. That's one of the most divisive things for Spider fans, where Straczynski broke up Mary Jane, had a deal with Mephisto the Devil. What are your thoughts on that? I don't think they would think people are still talking about this 10 plus years later, the marriage getting dissolved.
Right. Well, I mean, for me, like these things get some fans get very, very sensitive about these sorts of things. I mean, I'm honestly a little surprised they haven't undone it yet. It seems like the sort of thing they would eventually undo, and it wouldn't shock me if a year from now they do, or 6 months from now, or tomorrow. Who knows? Like I said, I'm 6 months behind, so who knows?
Well, you've probably read Spencer's run. There, Mary Jane and Peter are back together.
Sure.
Married. Yeah. Did Straczynski say anything about One More Day in your interviews?
I did ask him about it. He didn't say that much. I think that was, he wasn't entirely happy with how I know like the final issues. I think he like shares writing credit.
I think he wanted his name off, is what I've heard. Yeah,
I've heard that story as well. But I mean, his name is on the book in some form. I'd have to look back at his interview to see exactly what he said. I did ask about it. That was an interview again that was over email, so he could sort of choose to answer or not answer how he would like. And I did ask him about it, and he basically, if I recall correctly, he wasn't completely enamored with how that was the end of that story. But I think what he said was he was grateful that he did get to write them as a married couple, because he liked that relationship, and he again liked the sort of adult Peter Parker, just because he felt like we had, like you were saying, like we have seen the younger Peter Parker for years and years already. It's like he wanted to do something a little different, and he was really the last guy who got to do that for a long time.
What's your personal preference? You like Peter married or single?
Well, I grew up when he was married when I was a kid. Like I didn't. It's so funny to hear like you said, like the rationale is that kids don't want to read a married Spider-Man. They don't relate to a married Spider-Man. But when I was 11 years old, that was my Spider-Man. He was a married guy, and I didn't think it was odd. I didn't not relate to him. If anything, I sort of liked. It was like, wow. This dork grew up and he married this beautiful, intelligent, smart, wonderful person. So that's nice. I didn't really look at it as like, I can't relate to this just because I'm a nerd.
You could get a supermodel someday. We all could,
Absolutely. So I always enjoyed when the relationship was well written, when the characters were well written. I always enjoyed it, and I was sort of you know, I wasn't shocked necessarily when they broke them up, but I was, you know, I was certainly a little disappointed. But the thing is, you know, the stories that came out after that were great too. And I think you just have to, again, it's like you have to kind of look at it and take the long view. It's like inevitably all these stories come around, and there'll be another, you know, like you said, like they're not married in the comics right now, but they're back together in the comics.
Yeah.
And
It's
who
so
knows what's going to happen. It's very cyclical, and it's not what it is, it's how it is. You know, it's how the tale is told, as they say.
Exactly. So let's go to some comments we've gotten from Facebook and YouTube. The very first one we had from Austin. He says, I'm a huge huge collector of Marvel coffee table books. And as soon as Brad posted the video of the book on Facebook, it made me think I need to get this ASAP. So there you go. One sold.
Excellent.
If you go on the crawl space, I put an Amazon link. You can pick it up from there. This might be a friend of yours. He says, you hate the movie Jim Catra? What is that?
Gymkata, yeah. It's not a movie I hate. It's a movie I love. Eric is making fun of me. It's a masterpiece of a film about a spy for the U.S. government who is also a Olympic gymnast. So he is part gymnast, part spy, all hero. It's a wonderful film. People should watch.
Sofalo says Marvel Team Up 67 was my first comic. I don't know what that is. Let's look that up. Marvel Team Up 67. Let's see who was in that.
Yes, it was very difficult choosing the Marvel Team Up issues to put in the book. That was something I really...
Tigra, teaming up with Tigra against Kraven. There you go.
That one is not in the book. That is a cool cover.
Cool,
that was something we really I mean, I spent way too many hours looking at Marvel Team Up issues. Like there's a 2-page spread in the book of a bunch of different ones, but it's how do you choose? These covers are all amazing. All the, which characters do you include? And sort of mostly I think aired on the side of, characters that people recognize, people that are really popular in the MCU right now.
We got nearly 60 years to pick from. How are you going to put that in?
Right, in 125 issues of the first run of Marvel Team Up plus all the other ones. It's tough.
Matt wants to know, is the book available by Barnes & Noble or a local comic book shop?
So it probably depends on the store. The book was in Previews, the Previews catalog as a yes, as a former like the Diamond, the order catalog. It has a Previews number. If you look on the Diamond website, if you search for the title, you can get the number, and I'm sure your local shop would be happy to order it for you. I was very excited as a former employee who had to spend hours and hours looking at previews when my book was in Previews. That was a very proud moment for me. I have never seen it in a physical Barnes & Noble, but it is available on their website. Amazon certainly has it. And it's very easy to find online. If you do want to buy it from a specific store, like your local store, and I certainly applaud that. You probably will have to ask them to order it for you, but they should be able to.
If you look at the bottom of the page in the crawl space, I put an Amazon link. So if you want to order it right there, you can do it right there through Amazon. So there is a plug. SoFlo says, what's your favorite story arc?
Favorite story arc?
And this is kind of similar. Matt says, what's your favorite storylines from Amazing and Spec? So that's kind of the same question, but... 2 for 1 here.
I mean, we were just talking about the Straczynski run is pretty fan. Like the first run, I know that all that stuff with the spider totem and Ezekiel, and I love that stuff. And actually, the way that subsequent writers have kind of built on that to do Spider-Verse and Spider-Geddon and Spider Hullabaloo and Spider whatever is going to be the next thing.
That's next month, Spider Hullabaloo, yeah.
Spider Hullabaloo. They can have that one. That's a freebie. I really loved, as much as I loved Peter Parker, I really loved the Spider-Verse and all the different sort of iterations of the character. Like the sillier, the better. I love
that movie was great, wasn't it? Did you love the Spider-Verse?
It was incredible, but I even love the comics. I think the comics are great too, and I loved trying to think of some of the sillier characters like Spiders Man.
Peter Parker, you got to go there.
Spider-Ham is great. Spider-Man, where Aunt May becomes Spider-Man, is phenomenal. It's like this, the wackier, the better to me. I love all that stuff.
Nick Cage as Spider-Noir.
He was awesome in the movie. Yep. Yeah, great movie.
Matt says, "Who's your favorite writer besides your own work?"
My favorite writers, comic book writers.
Sure, you could do that, or Spider-Man writer, or whatever. Actually, another question, same question from SoFlo. Who's your favorite Spider-Man writer? So again, 2 for 1 here.
Yeah, I mean, as a kid, the one that really grabbed me was David Michelinie at the time, and then, a couple of years later, Ultimate Spider-Man hit me at just the right kind of age, which was Bendis, of course, and I always thought he wrote. Because some people kind of write a great Spider-Man, some people write a great Peter Parker, and I think he wrote both really well. I think Dan Slott wrote an amazing Peter Parker, and I love, I love the sort of kind of moral angle that there's always like a very strong message in his issues, morality tales, fables. I love. As hokey as that stuff can be, like it gets me every single time. I loved his very last issue of Amazing Spider-Man. Is that 801, I think?
Yeah.
Oh, I read that for the first time on a subway. I was crying on the subway like a loser. Oh my gosh. This was before, it had nothing to do with writing this book. I was just reading it as a fan. And you'll see in the book, the conclusion that because I wrote like an introduction and conclusion, like the very last image is from the last page of that issue.
I liked your conclusion. You talked about this teenager could be anybody. It could be you, and you quote Stan from ASM number 9.
That's right. Yes. Yeah. That's like one of the very last boxes. Like every one of those Lee and Ditko issues they always seem to end with Peter Parker walking off into the distance by himself, and they all ended with like come back next month for another, and that particular one said something like come back next month for more adventures of Spider-Man, the teenager who could be you.
Exactly. That humanizes that character for all those teens reading it.
Yeah.
Heroing
30-somethings, I guess.
He's talking about, we talked about your favorite writers. This Heroing wants to know about your favorite artists on Amazing.
We've mentioned most of them already. I know. Again, Mark Bagley was the guy who, when I was 11 years old, was the one that I was like, this looks really cool. And it was as much, the artwork as the stories in that case. But yeah, Bagley for sure is way up there. A name we haven't talked about at all on this podcast is Todd McFarlane. Looking back at his stuff, a lot of the fashion in his run is very 90s.
MJ's got the 90s, 80s hair, yeah.
The hair is huge, and the collars are pretty big, and the people's pants are very high-waisted in some cases. But like just the design, like the layout, like if you really want to see something really striking just within a couple of issues, if you look at like the issue before he starts of Amazing Spider-Man and the issue after, and then like 2 more issues after that, like just how dynamic the layout, the page layouts are from one to the other is really incredible. Just how much energy he brought to the book so quickly. The way
298, 299 are totally different books than 300.
Right.
The appearance of Venom, the style is totally different, yeah.
And you just look at like, there's a before and after with Spider-Man with him. The way the webs were drawn, the way they were used,
webbing,
and the way they're used to like almost define panels on the page and to control like your eye, the way the reader is reading the pages is really incredible. Like just like really working at like a super high level. So, obviously he didn't stay on the book super long, and then the adjectiveless Spider-Man, that he was writing also, maybe the stories aren't quite as good as the artwork, but I think as an artist, you can't you have to mention him because his influence looms large to this day, I think.
Sold 2.5 million copies of that Spider-Man #1. I mean, that's top that one.
That's not to be scoffed.
You mentioned McFarlane. Did you try that? I've been trying to get McFarlane on this show for years. Was he one that you weren't able to get for the book?
Another one that I tried, and yeah, couldn't get a hold of him. Emails, calls. I had different, like I mentioned earlier, I had people in the industry who could, get in touch with people, and couldn't make it happen.
Struck out too. Matt Bird says, Gwen or MJ? Who do you like better?
I was never a huge Gwen fan as a kid, maybe because she had, sort of tragically been gone for so long by the time that I was reading.
Plus, so I was always really Ditko issues. She's crazy. Yeah. I mean, she's really messed up.
And so for me, I was always more of an MJ guy. But I've loved, we have that we showed that little sidebar of Spider-Gwen, and I've sort of loved that version of the character. Honestly, I think is a great kind of very inventive reinvention of that character.
And you mentioned in your sidebar here that costume is beautiful. It's such a unique design.
Oh, it's such a great costume. One of the all-time great costumes, I think. Spider-Man or otherwise. Exactly. And the artwork in her solo books has been really, really beautiful and striking and unusual. And it just makes perfect sense that like the way that they kind of turned her into her own hero, I thought was great. So long live Spider-Gwen. I think she's fantastic.
Matt Bird, besides Spider-Man, who is your favorite Marvel character?
Oh, besides Spider-Man, honestly, like a lot of my other favorite characters are like DC characters. I'm a huge Green Lantern fan, a huge Flash fan. I mean, a lot of my favorite Marvel characters who aren't Spider-Man are kind of in the, the Spider-Man, like the villains. I love Dr. Octopus, Green Goblin, Chameleon.
Yeah.
For some reason, I always thought Chameleon was like I love Chameleon. I feel like Chameleon's one of the characters that's underutilized. Like just a fascinating. Like he could. I know he's a villain, but I feel like there should have been a Chameleon comic book a long time ago. Just his superpower and his backstory makes him a very interesting character that I've always wanted to read more about. And he's gotten some storylines here or there. Maybe this is my love of that first storyline I read as a kid, where with the parents talking. Maybe it is. I don't know. But
everybody has a forum where they start reading. Stan always said that every issue is someone's first, and that was yours.
That's right. That's right. But right now I'm loving is it the Immortal Hulk? Is that the?
Oh my gosh, that's such a good book.
That book is really great, and Jason Aaron on Thor. The War of the Realms. I was just reading on Marvel Unlimited. That just wrapped up. That's amazing.
Have you read Jason Aaron's Star Wars on Marvel Unlimited? That's really good.
I started. Yeah, I didn't. I don't. How long did he write it for? Because I think I read like
maybe 50 issues, maybe.
Yeah, I didn't last until the end. I probably read about the first 25 or so, I think.
Yeah. I like Jason Aaron stuff. He actually came to a local comic book convention. I interviewed him where he was writing that Spider-Man Wolverine miniseries that came out. That was a really good one. So I wish he would write more Spider-Man. I think that's a logical next step for him. So Heroing says, what do you think of the MCU's version of Spider-Man? The cinematic universe.
Yes, sure. I've liked all the Spider-Men, the movies themselves. I haven't always liked all the movies. I was not a big fan of the Amazing Spider-Man series, but I liked Andrew Garfield.
And Emma Stone. I mean, she was perfect.
She was well. That was the best part. I mean, if you like Gwen Stacy, especially, I thought they were together. They had a great chemistry. They were really good together.
I would say she'd make a great Mary Jane. Just color her hair her natural redheaded.
She would have been. She's a talented actress. I don't think we're shocking anyone by saying that for sure. In terms of like the MCU, I thought both of the movies they've made so far are great. I'm glad they're gonna make another one. I think Tom Holland is a really good Spider-Man. I guess some people don't like that, the relationship with
Tony Stark,
Iron Man, and
I personally hate it.
What's that? You hate it?
I hate it. He's not a sidekick.
Again, to me, it's like there's no. I enjoy seeing kind of different variations of the character. And I think in that case, what I've liked about it is that he's gotten to play a really kind of young, immature Spider-Man. Tobey Maguire was like 30 when he made the first Spider-Man movie, and even though he was in high school, he's barely, he's out of high school before the midpoint of the movie. And Andrew Garfield, is probably about the same age and incredibly handsome, does not look like a gangly, awkward teenager. So I've sort of enjoyed the fact that this Spider-Man really feels like a kid. And, even though he has all the powers and stuff, the fact that they've made, he doesn't have, they don't really talk about Uncle Ben. They don't.
I hate that too.
See, to me, what I like about it is it's almost, I feel like, especially after the last one, it's like we're watching him learn with great, like, I honestly don't know if Uncle Ben, I guess they've said he did have an Uncle Ben because they've shown a couple of like very vague teases of it. Like he had his suitcase or whatever.
Yeah, but that's one of my biggest points too. At the end of the movie of Far From Home, he doesn't care that he lost Uncle Ben's suitcase. May comes to pick him up, says, "Didn't you have luggage?" Oh, whatever.
Right, but I mean, that's fair, I guess. But I sort of like that he's kind of learning on the job, and I wonder if his Uncle Ben wasn't such a great guy, and if like by the end,
that's going to make me hate MCU for Spider-Man even worse.
I really don't mind.
Uncle Ben's a jerk.
I just think it's cool to see. Like, I almost feel like we're watching him have a longer version of his origin on screen. And I wonder if at the end of the next movie or whatever MCU movie he pops up in next, like if at some point he's going to kind of fully get there to the "with great power comes great responsibility" shtick. I sort of like the journey that character is on. He doesn't feel fully formed to me, which, for a teenager, I think feels very appropriate.
Matt wants to know your favorite Spider-Man film. What's your favorite of all of them? Let's see if we have the same one.
I mean, I think I would probably vote for Into the Spider-Verse, to be honest with you.
We don't. Spider-Man 2 is my favorite. With
Spider-Man 2 is the other, really, really good one. The Spider-Verse movie, I've watched it so many times now, and every time you watch it, you find the little details they put in there. The dad bod Spider-Man speaks to me in a very personal way, which I like. But I also just, I love the way that they adapted Miles and all those other characters like Spider-Ham, Spider-Man Noir, even the way the Kingpin is used in it. It's great. It's a really, it's and the animation, just technically, it's so incredible. The more you read about, I have like the Art of Spider-Verse book. And the more you
need to get that, I haven't seen it.
Yeah, it's great. The more you read about the sort of the techniques that they used, like just blending of 2D and 3D and using these different like techniques and frame rates, and to make, like almost subliminally to like use all the stuff in animation that you can't do in live action, like specifically to kind of tell the story, I think is just incredible.
Right. We kind of hit on this, but Chi-Town wants to know: are you a fan of Mary Jane Watson? I would say
yes. Absolutely. I saw that there's like I don't know what the full title is, but that she has like her own.
No, Amazing Mary Jane.
Amazing Mary Jane. Yeah, I saw that. Yeah. I saw that exists. I'm very. I guess 6 months from now, when it's on Marvel Unlimited, I'll look forward to reading it. I haven't read it yet, but
really good.
Yeah. I love Mary Jane.
Matt wants to know your favorite Spider-Man costume.
That's a great question. I did specifically ask Alex Ross about the costume from his run of covers, because I always thought that was a cool costume. And then I thought in the Spider-Man game, the PS4 game, I played, like you could get alternate costumes in the game, which was one of the cool things about it. I thought the costume, the Alex Ross costume, was like the best costume in that game, and that was like my favorite. I would put that on and just swing around.
Are you talking about the one with Dan Slott that he redid, or are you talking about the movie one for the Maguire one?
Specifically the one that we showed the one that he did for it was Amazing Spider-Man Volume 4 or 5. The Parker Industries.
That one's your favorite.
Yes. I mean, I think my favorite is honestly just the classic, perfect, original costume. But in terms of the reinventions, I always thought this was a really cool costume. And I thought, like I was saying, like in the game, it looked really cool in the game because, you know, like you can see his like designs there. Like it's got kind of like a metallic armory kind of sheen to it, which in the actual comic, in the interior art, didn't often come across. It looked more like basic kind of spandex with like a glowy emblem on the chest. And in the game, it really looked like, you know, almost like Iron Man armor, but with Spider-Man, and it still had the glowy chest.
And the legs go up a little bit on the spider too. More classic.
I just thought that was a really cool kind of update. And I, you know, when I interviewed him, I mentioned that, and he actually said he was like, he agreed, like it looked really good. It made me look better. It made me look better in the game than in some of the artwork. He actually agreed with that.
That's cool. Love that game. I'm looking forward to the sequel, which probably they're going to bundle it with the PS5. They're going to make me buy a PS5 just for that game, I imagine.
I hadn't thought about it, but you're probably right, and I will have to buy one because there's no way I won't play it because that game was.
What a segue! Did Michael ever? Did Matt ever have a Spider-Man game on any system? What?
So many. I love Spider-Man games. You know, I don't play a ton of video games anymore. I just don't have the time. But like whenever a new Spider-Man game comes out, if it's notable in any way, I tend to make the time.
Right. Do you remember what your first Spider-Man game was? Mine was the Atari.
I never had Atari. I'm a little younger, I think, but I did play my uncle's Atari and play Spider-Man on it with the swinging up the building for sure.
Green Goblin at the top, yep.
And the Green Goblin at the top. I was very little, so I was never very good at it, but I did play that one. I think the first one I had, I don't think I ever had one for Nintendo, but I had several for Genesis. So there was the one game for Genesis that was just Spider-Man, which was good.
There was a Kingpin one too, I think.
He was the main bad guy of that one as well, I think. Yeah. The one that I loved was the Maximum Carnage game.
Oh yeah, with the red cartridge?
The red cartridge.
Yeah.
Which, because I was always a big fan of those kind of beat 'em up style games. And so that was kind of the perfect combination of Spider-Man plus my favorite kind of genre of games. They had it was sort of like there was a Spider-Man arcade game that was kind of like that.
It was weird. It had like Namor and Hawkeye and Black Cat.
Hawkeye and Mockingbird, I think. Or no, Black Cat.
Black Cat, yeah.
Black Cat. Yeah.
I had a buddy of mine that had an arcade where $5 you can play all day. And he went out of business and he had a Spider-Man arcade and he wanted $800. And I'm like, the mortgage or the and the sheer the space devotion to that thing. I'm like, and plus it's got Namor and Hawkeye in it. I mean,
I love that game too. But yeah, it was a real quarter eater. Because, I think just walking around, you would lose energy constantly just by walking around.
What Matt wants to know about your thoughts on Nick Spencer's stories, the current writer of Amazing Spider-Man.
Well, like we've said, I'm a couple of months behind because I'm reading when things go up on the Marvel Unlimited. But I've enjoyed most of it. I think it's really good. I like his Peter Parker a lot.
Yeah.
I thought what was the Kraven storyline called exactly?
You got me. I remember.
Whatever it was called, I liked.
Well, he was inside the dome.
Yeah, he was trapped in Central Park with the villains. But yes, I like that one a lot. And who's writing Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man? I'm blanking on whoever's writing that.
What are you? Am I 0 for 2 now?
Whoever's writing that, is it Tom Taylor?
Yeah, there you go, Tom Taylor. Yeah.
I think I love that book. I mean, again, I'm 6 months behind, but I think
that one just wrapped up at 14. It got canceled. So I know.
You just broke my heart because I didn't know that.
Sorry.
I thought that book was tremendous. I wish that's the first book that's come along since. Well, that and the Spider-Man life story were the two books that have been going on right now that I've been reading where I'm like, I wish these could have been in my book that we could have figured out. Unfortunately, I finished writing it, before they really were going.
Soflo says the storyline was called Hunted.
Okay.
Hunted. Yep. That was pretty easy. I don't know why I didn't remember that. He also Matt wants to know your thoughts on Joe Quesada. Did you reach out to him for an interview too, or?
I didn't get to talk to him. I tried. I think underrated Spider-Man artist. He hasn't done a ton of stories, but I really like his, like he drew One More Day, which of course is a very, the writing aspect of it is very controversial, of course, but I think, he's done some covers too. I think most of them didn't end up in the book, but they were on the short list. Right. I really liked a bunch of them, but underrated Spider-Man artist, I would say.
Yeah. Jonathan wants to know about does the success of bringing Superman's marriage and even adding a kid show that bringing back the marriage can lead to greater storyline opportunities if they brought Peter back as married?
Well, they've done. I mean, to me, it's like they did Renew Your Vows. I think they sort of, we exist in this space now where the fans are knowledgeable and smart enough that they understand that there can be these different versions. And so I think Renew Your Vows isn't going on anymore, but that was sort of like what that was. And it wouldn't shock me if they did more things like that, where you do get to see, alternate versions, different corners of the Spider-Verse, so to speak, that might have things like that.
Matt wants to know favorite villain, Spider villain. Who's your fave?
Dr. Octopus, for sure.
Nice.
I think it's got to be. I mean, to me, it's like the clear. He's the clear number one. I guess Green Goblin's the other one everyone always mentions. I prefer Dr. Octopus. Same. I think they've done some really fascinating things with him over the last couple of years too, where that that have been very, very interesting for his character.
Javi kind of asks things that we've already asked, but he says he's looking forward to buying the book, and thanks for your time.
Good. I hope you like the book.
Javi also wants to know your favorite Spider-Man figure. Was it Secret Wars or Mego like mine?
I did have a really big Mego, the 12-inch Mego, which I actually did recently buy on eBay. That was my recent eBay purchase, because I found mine and it was missing a hand and the costume was shredded, and I was like, I can't display this. So I bought I sort of found a relatively inexpensive one on eBay. And I have that displayed with a couple of different. I don't have a shrine like you do back there anymore. I used to. We were saying this off the air, but I have it displayed with a couple of other little ones. I do have a Secret Wars Spider-Man. That was the other one that I had as a kid. I still have my original one. It's upstairs in my house right now. The one that I think is my favorite, to be honest with you, is the Spider-Man 2 movie Spider-Man. It's like very posable. You can pose each individual finger. That figure, you know exactly which one I'm talking about. I think they made it with magnet and non-magnet versions. I have the non-magnet version.
Are you talking about the giant one?
No, I have the giant one too, actually. But that one's almost too big.
The magnet one I've got on my fridge upstairs. I know what you're talking about.
It's like the normal, whatever they are, 6, 7, 8 inch regular action figure size, like Marvel Legends size. But that one, I don't really collect them anymore, but I have quite a few, and that was the one where when I bought it, I was like, I don't think there's going to be a better. I mean, maybe they have since then, but like when I got it, I was like, this is the greatest Spider-Man figure I've ever seen, and I don't know if they'll ever top it. For that size, anyway.
I got out of Marvel Legends once they started becoming $20 a pop. Like they're a little pricey. This was 2004, so I probably paid $10 maybe. Exactly. Chi-Town Spider-Man wants to know your favorite MJ story.
Well, it's definitely the one that we mentioned earlier, the one by DeFalco and Ron Frenz, the one where it's like just like an issue of them talking and walking in Central Park, and she reveals her sort of backstory. And I love that issue. And then I also somebody pointed this out to me on another interview, that I love issues where Spider-Man doesn't be Spider-Man and he just sits around talking.
Here's the one you were talking about, 259.
Yes. Yep. Love that issue. And then the other one is
I'll look for it right now. What's your other one?
It's probably Ultimate Spider-Man 11 or 12. It's the one where Peter tells Mary Jane that he's Spider-Man. So I guess maybe it's number 10, maybe 10. It's the one with the big.
Oh, it's the big conversation in the bedroom that I'm Spider-Man. I don't know my Ultimates as good as I do my Amazings.
maybe it's number 9. It's somewhere in that. It's the one with the big close-up of the mask in his hand is what it is.
Like
that is certainly that issue, but
there we go. Like this scene, I think, is what you're talking about.
Yes, it's in that. That's part of that. That issue. I don't know.
That's a good one. That one, like you said in your book, it doesn't have any Spider-Man in it. It's just a conversation.
It's just two people, right? It's two people in a room. Like the whole comic takes place in that one room. I'm a sucker 13, for. Okay, 13. We got that. I was off by a few issues. I'm sorry.
We'll do the cover of it.
I'm so embarrassed. I couldn't.
No, dude, I didn't know it either.
Yeah, that's the one.
There you go, right there.
I love an issue where Spider-Man, Peter, and Mary Jane just sit around talking. Oh, that's drama. Give me more of that. I
should have just looked in comments. Adam says it's Ultimate 13. There you go.
Adam was correct.
Well, let's go over again how they order the book. Tell the various ways so we can promote it. So you guys can look at the.
Yeah, I mean, the easiest way is Amazon. I know you said you had a link on your website for it. The name of the book is Marvel's Spider-Man From Amazing to Spectacular.
It's right there.
We don't just talk about those two comics. I'm not entirely sure how the title was chosen by the publisher, but yeah, we talk about every comic from 1962 pretty much until the end of last year. So that's the cover, that's the title, and you can get it on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. I haven't seen it, to be honest with you, in a lot of physical stores, but it is very easy to find online if you have a specific online retailer. And I have seen it in a few comic shops, and you can ask your comic shop to order it. It does have a previews number. I should know what it was, but I don't. But it is available through Diamond and previews.
That's got to be the biggest thrill as an author. You go to a bookstore and there's your work right on the shelf for people to buy. That have you done that? Have you seen this on the shelves and just geeked out?
Yes, it does not suck when that happens. It could happen more, to be honest with you. I've been to a few stores looking for it and they don't have it, and then you're like, oh. But when it is there, it is it's very exciting.
And like I said, if you go to the crawl space right now, there's a link to Amazon right there. So, well, Matt, anything we didn't hit up that you wanted to talk about?
I think that pretty much covers it.
That's awesome. Any other spider work in your future that you're going to do? You're going to do a follow-up to this book, possibly? I'd love it.
Nothing's happening right now. I actually did a very little thing that I don't think has even been announced yet, but it is Spider-Man related, and it's totally done. It probably will come out at some point this year.
Okay.
But
hit me up. We'll promote it. That'd be awesome.
Okay. Yes. It actually, I did more than one. I did Spider-Man and something for another character. They're sort of both connected, but very different than this. But yeah, I would love to do another book like this, just about, because this is all just about the comics. So if somebody wants to make one about the movies and the games and the toys and the everything, I would be delighted. I
would here. We can talk about lunchboxes to book in this interview.
There you go. Yeah, all that stuff. It hasn't happened yet, but I have not exhausted the amount of things I could say about Spider-Man, which is very clear because we just talked for 90 minutes after writing a giant book.
Well, YouTubers and Facebook, thank you for sticking with us. We've had consistent viewership and comments coming in, so this was a fun little interview. So I appreciate Matt for coming on. Thank you so much, man.
My pleasure. Good talking to you.
All right, I'm going to hit the end.